folks, this is the video for Lickety Stitch Quilts Block of the Month Three Sisters pattern, and we are on block 11, believe it or not, pyramids. So we've got our pattern, we have our color options laid out, we've got my notes to the side. We actually followed the cutting instructions for this one because the flying goose blocks were a little bit odd and it was hard to find a shortcut method that would give us the right size. So, following the cutting instructions, which is new for me, we have one fabric A block. We have our fabric B blocks. We cut one square. We cut it in fourths to get these little triangles. Those are going to go around our A block to make the square and square. We have our D and F fabrics cut, and those will be the center of our flying geese. I have my E and G fabrics cut, and those are going to be the outsides of my flying geese. I have my C fabric cut, and then my background H and I fabrics. So, right away, the first thing I'm going to do is take that center square, just like we've been doing it, and I'm going to mark my centers because I am lining up triangles around the outside. I didn't cut big to give room to trim. It makes me super nervous. So what I'm doing instead is I'm going to make a really scant 1/4 inch seam when I sew so that I can square up just a little bit. So I've marked my centers with my iron. I folded in half and marked. You can use your erasable or removable marking pencil. Whatever way works for you. I'm going to line my triangles up with my points along the line so that I know I'm centered. I'm going to sew them to all 4 sides, and I will be back when that's done. Okay, this is not my favorite method, but it works. I have a ruler that has a really nice dark 1/4 inch line on it. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm lining up my 1/4 inch line with the points of my triangles. And I've got just a little bit of hair trim on the side because I use that super scant 1/4 inch, but not on that side. It's going to be perfect except for the dog ear. So I'm glad I used that really scant 1/4 inch. I don't know why I struggle with squaring the squares like I do, but I do. And then again on this side, we had just a tiny little trim, which makes me think on this side. And of course the reds and the reds make it a little bit hard to see. So I'm all squared up to my 1/4 inches, and I'm coming in right at 4 3/4. So we're going to call that happy. I'm going to give that just a little bit. I missed the tip of a dog ear there. And the next thing we're going to do is our flying geese units. So easy, and so easy to get wonky because we've got all these cut edges. So I'm going to take my centers. I've got my centers, and I am just going to sew the edges on. I'm going to starch these again before I sew because they've been sitting on my desk for a minute and they've got fussy. But I'm going to starch these a lot because they're flying geese units and mine tend to go wonky. Yours are probably perfect. Mine rarely are, which is why I really like those make 'em big and trim up method. But the finished size of these corner squares that we cut to 2 5/8 is going to be the size that our flying geese end up needing to match up to because these get sewn together. So that's why the unfinished size is like 2 5/8 and it's an odd size. So we're going to do them using this method. I strongly recommend pinning. If you are a gluer, this is probably your time to shine. Gluing these here and then sewing them. But I'm also going to recommend just making sure that you've got some good starch on your fabric. So I'm going to do this for both sets of flying geese. This is my other one. And nope. This one gets the picnic table fabric. I'm going to end up with for each of these 8 total. So I'm going to go ahead and repress, starch, sew, and then come back. And really, once we have the center square and a square and all 8 of these sewn, it's just a matter of putting the block together. This block goes together really easy, folks, which is nice because next week we've got some inset seams, which is also nice. Just people are a little bit more uncomfortable with that. So I'm going to go do that and I will be back. Okay, so they end up 2 5/8 by 4 5/8. A hair to either side, that's okay. I'm going to assemble these just a little bit different than the instructions do because I like the way it lines up better. So I'm going to take excuse me, I just lost my fabric, my corner, and I'm going to put that together with my outer flying goose, and then I'm going to add, oh, that's my corner, that's the bigger one, my eye pieces in either side. So I'm going to make 4 of these units. Oh, I should have done that backwards for you, sorry. My outer flying goose, my H background, my eye background, and I'm going to make 4 little corners like that. And then I'm going to do the next line. So I'm going to assemble these in lines. I'm going to do my inner flying goose, my C squares, and then my other corner pieces, my inner corners. Sorry, I'm trying to do this upside down so it's, if I were doing this facing me, so I do it facing you. So it's going to look like that. So I'm going to do this line, and I'm going to make 2 of those. This line. You're welcome to assemble them in the pattern directions, but I'm going to assemble them like this. And then I'm going to put together the center piece and then the opposite. So I'm going to do these corners first so we don't get lost in the weeds. And then I'll come back and do the next row. And then we'll do the center row. And I said we were going to do 4 of these, but we're not. We're going to do 2 of these corner pieces. So I'm going to do 2 corner pieces first. I'll be back. Okay, so we have our 2 corners done. And where these are in the diagram are these corners and this corner. I'm going to go ahead and do this second row here. So I'm going to take my eye triangle, which I had subcut wrong, so I had to go back and redo it. And I'm going to take, this is so weird to do it upside down, my eye triangle, my C squares, my inner flying goose, am I pointing this at me or at you? I'm going to point it at me and then just turn it around so that I know I get it right. Right? Helps if I'm using the right flannel. This reminds me of the flannel boards at church, right? Like you've got your little people and they tell a story. So there's going to be 2 of these. 3. And then that. So you are going to make 2 of these. So I've got my eye triangles, my C squares, my inside close to the center flying goose, C square, eye triangle. Yeah, and we're going to do 2 of these. They're going to line up, sorry. with our corners just like that. So this is the next piece we're doing. Do 2 of these. I triangle, C square, inside flying goose, I triangle, C square. The point, I guess, point of the I triangle points away from the point of the flying goose. So that's how you know you've got them pointed in the right direction. If your point of your I triangle is pointing the same direction as your flying goose, it's not going to fit into your square, or it'll be flipped backwards. So the point of your I triangle points away from the point of your flying goose. I'm going to sew these together, and then both units to the center. I'll be back. Okay, so I've got my little secondary strip here done. I've got 2 of them. They are going to fit right underneath the point strips I have already done. So now is a good time to talk about pressing. And if you haven't already noticed, these are going to nest. So I have pressed in my triangle strips towards the background. And then in the second strips, I pressed towards the background and then towards the flying goose in the middle, so that these are pressed out and these are pressed in. If you haven't pressed that way, you can always correct it by repressing, or you can do the opposite. You can press in here and out here. You just have to make sure that your seams are going to nest. So I'm going to put those up and do the next set, the middle set. So you're going to take your outside flying goose and add your H triangle. I've went ahead and done that because I was working ahead. And then your inside flying goose. Whoops. Your center square goes next. And let's see if I can get a little bit better angle here. There we go. And then another inside flying goose pointing out. Maybe this way. Maybe I'm going the wrong way. Of course I'm going the wrong way. I'm having a really heck of a night right here. Sorry, guys. And then your outside. So we're going to put together the center strip. When I sew these, I'm going to sew with my point on top so I can make sure I'm hitting that point with my line. My fabrics are super busy and very similar in this quilt with the reds. So it's really hard to tell where I missed, which gives me room to cheat, let's be honest. But, you know, because I want to be precise, I'm going to sew these here, and I'm going to sew with this one on top so I can see that point as I'm sewing. And even if I have to fudge it a little, I'm going to hit that point. And then the same thing when I sew these units to the center. I'm going to sew with the center point on top so that I can make sure I'm hitting the point, I'm not cat biting into it, and I'm not missing it entirely. And then, of course, I'm going to press. So I pressed towards my background. My next press in the one that joins it, this is pressed out, so this is going to be pressed towards the point. This is pressed in, so I'm going to press out from my center. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm watching as I press my center unit, and then all I have to do is line up my other 2 units, make sure that my seams are nested, and sew. So I'm going to sew the center. We'll be back to add the edges, and we should be done. This is a quick block, folks. I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so you can see the top half with the center, and this is exactly how it's going to go together. I'm going to line up my nested seams, make sure everybody's pressed the same way. I'm going to sew. I'm going to line up my nested seams, make sure everybody's pressed the same way, and sew. It goes together really quickly at this point. We're just going to get those seams done. We're going to sew the bottom half on the exact same way, and we will be back to share our finished block. And that is it. Like I said, it really is just as simple as doing the square in the square, 8 flying geese, and then assembling it in rows. I assembled it in rows because I thought it was easier to line up the seams just one way, vertical and lines. There's the assembly instructions on the pattern are fine. It's not tricky for this one. I'm not even going to say it's better the way I did it. I just thought it was easier for me to make sure that those lined up. And even then, there are a couple places where I still missed. But again, this quilt is for a 12-year-old boy who is going to look at it and see that it is red in denim and love it because I made it and not because it's perfect, which is a good thing, because if he was loving it because he was perfect, he probably wouldn't like me very much either. So, with that said, I'm going to get this done and hopefully out to you by this weekend. YouTube takes forever to upload videos, but it's ready, and this is a fast block. The next block, block 12, has some inset seams, and those are one of my favorite things to do, but not everybody's favorite things to do. So I'm going to show you the instructions without using the template. The instructions with using the template are just the same. It's just a difference of how you cut it. I will cut my fabric without the template, but we'll assemble it the same because the shapes are the same. On this one, there is a cheater method too. If you absolutely do not do inset seams, we can divide that G triangle into two and then create 2 units and sew it right up the middle, and it will look just as good. Again, there's no judgment. It will be fine, but it is a fun block next month. So you did awesome. Enjoy your block, and I look forward to seeing them. I will talk to you soon.